So I've worked off camera, if you will, just trying to get some of the small edits, get things a little more consistent, all using the same tools and processes we've looked at before. Really nothing new. Everything at this point, it's going to get more and more individual, more and more. Each one of you is going to have a little bit different result. It's not meant to be um, a strict copy exactly what I do. It's more to give you the tools again so that you can figure out ways of dealing with different situations you may come up to as you work. So let's say we're done with this, and if we look at, if you remember, we have two halves. This is the original, this is that instance, so I'm going to get rid of the instance. And if you look in the outliner, you should probably see that your ribcage is actually inside a group called ribcage. So with that selected, I'm going to go to the mesh, mirror, get to the dialog box, and I'm going to say, I'm going to turn off the cut, turn on only combine with original, and I have this selected as customized, and I set it to 4. You can probably set it lower than that if you want. And the reason I did that is when I use automatic, it connected the faces in the holes that we made. It made some connections I didn't want. So by limiting it to a smaller range and saying apply, see, I get a pretty good mirror image. And if I select it, you can see now it's one big solid thing. It's merged all those border vertices, okay? And that gives us now our final appearance here. Now again, we're a little bulky, and what I want to do is fix the back before we finally finish this exercise. So to do that, I'm going to make room, in other words, to accommodate the vertebral column. So I'll right mouse and say edge, and I'll select the line going right up the posterior. And I'm going to use a new tool here under edit mesh. I'm going to pick up the bevel. Now what bevel will do is it will allow you to specify how many segments. By default it's at 1. I'm going to switch it to 2. It's going to put a pair of lines now, since I have 2, about 0.5 or half of our unit on either side. If I apply it, you can see what I mean. And what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to get rid of this edge that's running down the seam in the middle. So under edit mesh, I'm going to say delete edge and vertice. Then I'm going to grab the faces that are now in the center. And these really represent my vertebra. So one thing I want to do is go back to my all 4 view, and as best as possible look in the front window and see how this width compares. So you can see the vertebra up top. It might be just a little wide. So I'll just, shucks, it dropped it by accident for me. Hold on, I gotta get them again. Just narrow, make that just a little bit narrower. Okay. And now I'm going to use the side window to help me move that collection anteriorly so that it represents, if you will, the front of a vertebral column. Now if you find it's a little hard to get a perfect curve, so you may have to rotate the whole group or pick 1 or 2 faces like this, especially this bottom one here. We know the lumbar tend to be a little bigger, so we can scale that a little wider. And if it's not quite at the right angle, although it looks to be pretty good. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the vertebra between the spaces in here. This one may want to come down a little bit and go back. Okay, so that's roughly then Now we still have a very odd shape. Now that's way too big, that gap. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the two edges that parallel, okay, that parallel the bevels we made, this one and this one, and I'm going to scale them together. And you notice that kind of brings that shape back to where it should be for the rib cage. Okay, so that's pretty much our rib cage. We'll come back to it later. You can continue obviously as much as you want, manipulating vertices. We will use this as a template, and in many ways what we can do later when we get to the point where we really want to make the rib cage is actually work with several of these curves, and make them really, as best as possible, follow the path of the ribs, and then we can actually do something called extruding a circle or oval right along their path in order to create the ribs. So that's a step we'll do later on after we've built quite a few more structures. But this is our general guide then, our general rule. Looks like I'm just a little bit narrow right up here, so I might just, again, I don't have that instance on now, so I have to use this thing. Make sure I grab complementary pairs, if you will. Same thing for here and here. And this is again that hard part, or more challenging, when I'm looking from the front view and I'm trying to decide which one of these is actually more accurate, the lateral view or the anterior view. Okay, and that's pretty much all we need to do now for this. And from this point forward, we'll start working with these tools, making other shapes.